But this is, of course, the thinking of those who have a corrupted aqidah, the thinking of those who have a corrupted fitrah. The predisposition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us upon to worship Him and Him alone. Back to this topic. People are four categories. You'll find that the first category, one who is quickly gets angered. One who is quickly angered. And for them to snap out of their anger, it takes a very long time. And that's the worst type of people. And chances are you'll find people like that very lonely. They don't have very many healthy relationships. Unable to control themselves. Unpredictable. And people don't like to be around someone who is unpredictable. The second category is those who get angry quickly, but they also snap out of it quickly. And this one is a little bit less. He's not obviously the worst, but again, this is not, the quality of being able to snap out of your anger quickly is an excellent quality. But to snap into this state of mind, into this state of anger very quickly is not a very good one. The third category or the third type of people are those who it takes a long time for them to be angered. It takes a long time for them to be angered, but it also takes a long time for them to snap out of it once they're angry. And of course, the best is the fourth one, which are the ones that it takes a very long time for them to be agitated, to be angered. But if they get angry, they snap out of it very quickly. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks very highly of those, in the Quran where He says, وسارعوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها السماوات والأرض أعدت للمتقين. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and hasten, for a paradise, the width of which is the heavens and the earth. أعدت for the righteous, for the muttaqeen. The muttaqeen here, as the Prophet ﷺ tells us, إنما بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. إنما بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. So, for one to build his character to a level where he or she are not going to be easily angered, they need to follow the divine advice of the Prophet ﷺ. And the very best of example is the very example of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And we mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ would not get angry for any reason except for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anas ibn Malik, the narrator of this hadith, the narrator of many of the ahadith. This hadith was narrated by Abi Hurairah radiallahu anhu. The narrator of many ahadith, who was a servant in the house of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, when I was a young boy, the Prophet ﷺ would send me to do things for him. And I would go and I would get distracted and I start playing around as a child. And I would come back, very late. And oftentimes, I did not do what he told me to. He said, he never asked me why I did what I did, or why I didn't do what I was supposed to do. This was the Prophet ﷺ. And this is Anas ibn Malik speaking, which is one of the, the scholars of Islam and a companion of the Prophet ﷺ and a servant of the Prophet ﷺ. He said, when I was a young boy, again, when the Prophet ﷺ sent me to do something for him, to buy something for him, a need that he had, so on and so forth, he never asked me why I didn't do what I was supposed to do, or why I did what I was not supposed to do. This was the character of the Prophet ﷺ. His mission, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يعني وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. Indeed, he was a man of mercy. He was a prophet of mercy, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Now we come to the reasons why people get angry. The nature of the creation of man from clay, al-hulm wal-waqar, al-hulm wal-waqar. Understanding the nature of the creation and how we were created will also enable us to deal, with the ills that we have. And everybody has ills within themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. So none of us is pure. In other words, we all on this path of struggle, endeavor to purify ourselves from and to rid ourselves from its evil, qualities. So the Prophet ﷺ, teaches us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also teaches us in the Quran that we were created, as He says in Surah Al-Insan, in Surah Al-Sajdah, الذي أحسن كل شيء خلقه وبدأ خلق الإنسان من طين. The one who perfected everything that He has created And he began the creation of man, the human being, from mud, from clay. So the nature of mud is a sukoon, al-waqar, al-hulm. It's a stable, it's a subtle element. Versus the nature of al-jinn, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْجَانَّ خَلَقْنَاهُ مِنْ قَبْلُ مِنْ نَارِ السَّمُونِ. And the jinn, the world of jinn, we have created that before the creation of man, before the creation of the human beings. مِنْ نَارِ السَّمُونِ, meaning that from the flame or the tip of the flame of the fire. And the nature of the jann is that, they're fast moving. They move swiftly, and they don't have the waqar, the subtle nature that the human being has. So understanding this nature will enable us, to deal with it more effectively, to be able to deal with it more effectively. Going back to the reasons why people get angry. First and foremost, the first thing is al-kibr. The first thing is al-kibr, meaning that the ego. You'll find that the larger of an ego a person has, the more likely to be easily instigated. Because anything that goes against their will, against what they like, against what they desire, any words that are uttered that can bear more than one interpretation, they will take it as an insult. Their ego is now under attack. So al-kibr, wal-iyadu billah, that the Prophet ﷺ, said, لا يدخل الجنة مرء في صدره مثقال حبة من كبر. That none enters paradise, and, in their hearts, even the weight of an atom of kibr. So this is a very dangerous quality that not only it could destroy a person in this dunya, but also it could prevent a person from entering paradise, in the hereafter. We see in the example of some of the tyrants of the world, which we mentioned one of them, the Pharaoh, la'nahullah. We mentioned him in the khutbah today. When the magicians that he has gathered, and the estimated numbers, of these magicians were in the thousands. They were in the thousands. And they were the experts at magic, and so on and so forth. When they've seen the ayah that Musa alayhi salam has come with, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that when they've seen that ayah, خَرُّوا سُجَّدًا, they went into prostration immediately. Why? Because they're the experts in this area. And imagine there is one person here standing with a stick in the front facing thousands of people that are experts in this area. فَأُلْقِيَ السَّحَرَةُ سُجَّدًا قَالُوا آمَنَّا بِرَبِّ هَارُونَ وَمُوسَى. So, the magicians went into prostration immediately. Did not give it even a second thought that this could be a magic trick or whatever. The truth was so evident, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَلْ نَقْذِفُ بِالْحَقِّ عَلَى الْبَاطِلِ فَيَدْمَغُ. We throw with the truth upon falsehood, and it of course becomes victorious. The answer that came from the Pharaoh because of his arrogance, قَالَ آمَنْتُمْ قَبْلَ أَنْ آذَنَ لَكُمْ. He said, you believed in him and what he has come with before I give you permission. Before I give you permission. So the issue here is not, did they present ample evidence to show that this is an ayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is he uttering the truth? Do you think he may be mistaken? So on and so forth. No. He said, آمَنْتُمْ لَهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ آذَنَ لَكُمْ. You believed in what he had come with before I give you permission. So this is the arrogance and what it may lead to. And in this case, it led to this person saying, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. There's an interesting commentary that is mentioned in the Athar, where Iblis himself would say, I refuse to prostrate myself to Adam. I refuse to prostrate myself to Adam. And that is out of respect really. Not because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam with his own hands, and he decreed that a soul be placed into him and so on and so forth. So it's an act of honor that he asked the angels, to prostrate themselves to Adam, not an act of worship. Because sujood is only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As an act of ibadah, sujood can only be disposed of to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here, what was narrated in the Athar is that Iblis is saying, look what had happened to me because I refused to prostrate myself to a man. What do you think is going to happen to a man that claims to be the All-High Lord? الذي قال أنا ربكم الأعلى, the one who claimed that I'm your All-High Lord, there is none above me. Subhanallah. So this is the garment of Iblis, Allah himself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of course promised, the people of the Pharaoh, النار يعرضون عليها غدوا وعشيا ويوم القيامة أدخلوا آل فرعون أشد العذاب. They are shown, the hellfire, the places in the hellfire, during the day and at night. And on the day of judgment, أدخلوا آل فرعون أشد العذاب, cause the people of the Pharaoh and those who followed him because of their arrogance and disbelief to taste the severest of punishment. So the first and most destructive cause for anger is kibr. Second is being keen upon gathering of this dunya as much as possible. And that's why you find that, and this is, by the way, a side note, but this is for us also to take heed from, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Remind because the reminder benefit the believers. Remind because the reminder benefit the believers. Where the Prophet ﷺ, when he says, تَكَادُ الْأُمَمُ تَدَاعَ عَلَيْكُمْ, that the nations will almost, gather around you to destroy you. And the Sahaba, out of concern, they said, أَمِنْ قِلَّةٌ نَحْنُ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. He said, O Prophet of Allah, are we going to be so few? So few. Look at the thinking and the mindset of the Sahaba, what tells us a lot. Because back then they were so few, but they were victorious. So they're thinking at the same level, أَمِنْ قِلَّةٌ نَحْنُ, meaning that the enemies are so great in numbers and we are so few in numbers. Is that why? They said, no, بَلْ أَنْتُمْ كَثِيرُونَ. No, you're going to be many, many. Notice here, just a disclaimer, the Prophet ﷺ is not making this statement to discourage us. Is not making this statement to put us down. This is not the character of the Prophet ﷺ. However, he's given us a warning. He's given us a warning. Where he says, وَلَكِنَّكُمْ كَغُثَاءِ السَّيْلِ. You are like the foam on top of a moving river. Meaning that you're weightless, you have no benefit. You have no substance. And in one other hadith, the Prophet ﷺ described the disease that we are infected or will be infected with, which we are, many of us, are infected with this disease. He said, al-wahan, sums it up in one word. قِيلَ وَمَا الْوَهَنْ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ قَالَ حُبُّ الدُّنْيا وَكَرَاهِيَةُ الْمَوْتِ. The love of this dunya and hating to die. حُبُّ الدُّنْيا وَكَرَاهِيَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Again, as a disclaimer, it is not the character of the Prophet ﷺ, the one that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent him as a mercy for all mankind, to put out statements or tell us a hadith that is going to put us down. To the contrary, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us this hadith in order to warn us, in order if we are infected with this disease, to catch ourselves in this dunya and not to wait until the time comes. So the second reason for one that is easily angered is that they are so keen upon every opportunity in this dunya. And any loss of any opportunity will just set them off. Any loss of any opportunity will just set them off. The third reason, as the Prophet ﷺ tells us in the hadith, من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. من حسن إسلام المرء, it is from the perfection of one's iman and one's Islam is to leave matters that do not concern them out of their circle of concern. SubhanAllah, as you travel around, particularly in many of the cultures that we come from, and all of you know what I'm talking about for those who come from overseas, you'll find that the neighbors are in the business of every neighbor in the neighborhood and outside the neighborhood. You'll find that the relatives would gather and talk about this person and that person and so on and so forth. You will find that the entire society at large, unfortunately, has nothing to do but to gather at cafes and drink coffee and smoke and gather around food tables and talk about this person and that person and so on and so forth. Now, not realizing, or sometimes realizing, that this is such a disease of the heart, that the Prophet ﷺ, when he called upon two women who were basically involved in ghiba, in vain talk, in backbiting, and he brought 2 buckets and he asked them to vomit in it. Literally showing us that backbiting, أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتة فكرهتموه. Would you like for one to eat the flesh of his Muslim brother or sister while they're dead? فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ. Of course nobody likes that. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concludes this ayah by saying, فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ, because He knows that we would dislike that.